Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 65. You're watching two guys talk about the Anglican world of news. George, I'm looking here at the numbers. The show is still more and more popular each week. I can't explain it.
Well, Kevin, just look at our competition.
You know, talk about something else that's falling from the sky, and that is an asteroid. What's coming our way? Is this an effect of perhaps global warming, or is this just some meteoric occasion?
I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today is February 20th, 2013, and our show this week is brought to you by Anglican 1000.
George, let's move on to our first story, and that is Pope Benedict XVI. Unlike previous popes for the last 500 years, this pope has decided to resign, and that has allowed many things to happen in the press, in the Roman Catholic Church, and amongst all of us journalists. The first is, oh my gosh, why is a pope resigning? Well, he is the first pope since Pope Gregory VII, some 600 years ago, to say, I'm going to step down and not die in office. The last pope who resigned didn't do it for that reason. He did it so he didn't have trouble with the papacy. There was dueling papacies at the time, but we're not going to get into all that. You know, when a pope resigns, it's going to have an element of scandal. And that's the first thing the press seemed to pick up here, George.
Oh, we have seen so many kooky, crazy stories out of the press. One story is that Pope Benedict resigned because he's under imminent threat of indictment over child abuse scandals. The Guardian newspaper said that Pope Benedict is resigned because he's lost his faith. You know, some of this stuff's bizarre. I don't know where they get it.
Well, it sells papers. I mean, you and I know that the headline makes the news, you know, not the story. And the reality here is we're watching a pope who just serves 7 short years after John Paul served, you know, almost a whole generation. John Paul also died in office like all the popes previous to him, and he died very visibly with Parkinson's disease, which he suffered from. And in this 21st century, we got to watch on video as this man had the tremors and he would kneel to pray, and you could visibly see the Parkinson's, you know, really attacking him as pope. And that was a very visual way to die. Pope Benedict has taken a different track, and we hear from people he's spoken to that I can't serve as pope by dying in office.
The Pope's brother, older brother, is also a Roman Catholic priest, and he's been talking to the German press, and from him we've learned that the Pope is blind in one eye, that he has had pacemaker surgery in the past few months, and that his doctors will no longer let him take long airplane flights. Now, one of the most important things for this Pope has been the church in Africa and Asia, and he can no longer visit there.
Yeah.
He can't fly to America.
And that's the reality is every pope, when they sit down in office in the first couple months, set out an agenda. And Pope Benedict is no different than that. He wanted to really work on ecumenical relations, which have been going very good since Vatican II. He also, as we talked about, wanted to really establish a larger beachhead in Africa and grow the church there like the Anglicans have done. He wanted to reaffirm that Europe has roots in Roman Catholicism, and he wanted to work with that. Strangely, he was very nice to the Jews, George.
And Kevin, you can't forget the ordinariate. Mm-hmm. All these things that Pope set out to do in a big theological picture were successful. It's the little stuff, little in the sense of not as long-lasting 500-year perspective, like the clergy sex abuse scandal,
sure,
that have been problematic. But you mentioned the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it may be because Pope Benedict is a German of a certain age that maybe Judaism is a sensitive topic for him coming out of, you know, as a teenage boy in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
However, we have to remember that for close on 1900 years, it wasn't the official doctrine, but the common perception of Judaism among Catholics and most Christians was that the covenant that God made with Abraham was nullified and replaced by the covenant God made with the Christian church through Jesus Christ. Therefore, Jews were not going to be saved. Well, Benedict and John Paul have said, no, that's not true. That there is, in a sense, a parallel path to salvation. God's covenant was not abrogated with the Jews. And today, theological relations with Judaism, I'm talking about Orthodox Judaism in Israel and conservative Judaism, is as good as it's ever been. And Benedict has made relations with the Jewish people a primary goal of his papacy, and he's been successful.
Another thing he's been successful on, and we're going to give a brief history here, since the 1940s and 50s on, the Roman Catholic Church has had to deal with clergy-level pedophilia. And it's just the scientific way we're going to say it, it was bad. And the way they dealt with it was to hide it and then move priests around to different congregations or monasteries or seminaries, whatever they could do to keep this quiet. And that wasn't the smartest way to go about it, and it really started to blow up in the 70s and 80s, and Pope John Paul had to deal with the reality of it breaking apart right before him. Pope Benedict had to deal with the people who covered it up.
Benedict went to Ireland, for example, 3 years ago and told the Irish bishops that they had to reach out spiritually and pastorally to people who had been abused by Catholic clergy and religious. And Benedict has been very forthright, very public, very strong. He's one of the first people who within the Vatican advocated laicizing, removing people from the priesthood who had been engaged in these immoral, terrible acts. Problem for Benedict has been that his foot soldiers, the bishops, have either been slow to act, or they fought him, or they just didn't want to deal with it. Now, I have to say, this is not a Catholic problem. This is also an Anglican problem.
Sure.
We've had clergy abuse scandals in England and in Australia in particular, and we've had some in the United States. However, they've not had the same degree of media exposure, and there's not as much money involved, so maybe that's what's driving it. And, like Cardinal Mahoney in Los Angeles agreed to a $600 million settlement to abuse victims, and he's been one of the people, it's now been revealed, who was dragging his feet over instituting the reforms the Pope was demanding.
So this brings us to the next challenge, George, and that's who's the next Pope? The press wants to know, the Roman Catholics want to know, and they're going to have a conclave to find out. Here in the Anglican Church, we chose a Justin Welby, a ex-oil tycoon, maybe not tycoon, businessman, a man with a Twitter account, a man who's really going to, as we'll report on later, take charge at Church House. And are we going to find that same skill set in the cardinals that they can choose from, George?
Well, Benedict had a Twitter account, but I don't think he actually was the one who ran it, because he can't type, he can't drive a car. He's a man of a certain age and some certain generation. He writes everything out by hand in script with a pencil. Do you remember those things, Kevin? Pencils? Now, yes, the Catholic Church does have cardinals who are very communication savvy, very tech savvy. Cardinal Dolan of New York, for example, is one such person. And there are some of the younger cardinals. I'm thinking of the fellow from the Archbishop of Manila,
Sure,
who are in their late 50s, who would fit that bill. However, I don't think they approach it in the same way we do. It took 6 to 9 months to elect an Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Apostolic Constitution of the Catholic Church gives them 20 days to hold a conclave. So they're not going to be auditioning the way Anglican candidates audition for the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Well,
who's going to be?
You know,
The 118 cardinals voting.
Yeah.
Let me make a wild guess and say that the former Archbishop of Quebec. He's somebody who has all those things, and if I'm going to pick a long shot, I'll go with him.
Well, if they do the equivalent of what the Anglicans did, I would say the next Pope would be Cardinal Dolan. He has the same background as Justin Welby as far as being young, hip, speaks well, funny, humorous. Well, British humorous and American humorous are far different things, but he's got that going for him. But you and I will have to wait, along with the rest of the world, for that white smoke to find out who the next Pope is.
Well, and we got to remember that there are 28 Italian cardinals, and they may decide, hey, it's jobs for the boys, Kevin, jobs for the boys.
Let's bring it on home.
Planting Anglican churches. So what does it mean to plant? What are the strategies for it? what is Anglican? And third, what is the church? So, I went back to the articles of the church. One of the major articles of the 39 articles says that the church is the visible gathering of men, implied women, to where the word of God is purely preached and the sacraments are duly administered. It has nothing about 1,000 people. It has a building. It's self-sustained. It's all that. So I think that we think too low of what God's given us to do instead of thinking big.
George, let's move on to some Anglican news. And we're going to talk about the new Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. Last week was his first week in office, and he arrived at Lambeth Palace probably in a chariot. I don't know how the first week works. They open up the doors, and the staff welcomes him. It's probably right out of Downton Abbey. And he comes in, and they show him around. He probably knows what it looks like, but they show him around anyway. It's his first day. He gets to sit at his desk for the first time, and they show him his nice leather chair and a little lamp on the desk he can turn on and off. And he hears off in the background a squeak, squeak, squeak as a dolly comes in bringing an appointment book. We call it a calendar. They call it over there a diary. And they put it on his desk, and they open up the book, and dust comes off, and they open up to the first page, and there's 35 items for his first day in office. George, what does our new Archbishop say?
No, I'm not going to be housebroken.
No.
This could have been straight out of the TV show Yes Minister, where where Jim Hacker comes in, and brand new cabinet minister, and Sir Humphrey, the head of the civil service in that department, gives him his appointments diary, and for the next 6 months, Jim Hacker is kept busy doing busy work, so that he's out of the hair, out of the power and authority that should be exercised by the staff. Well, that's what Lambeth Palace, the church house, tried to do to Justin Welby. They tried to neuter him, tried to house train him so that he would be kept busy while they did the important stuff. Justin Welby would be allowed to choose what color wallpaper he'd have in his office, but he really wouldn't be allowed to decide what the priorities of his job would be. And Justin Welby said no.
And that's the interesting reality here, is a busy minion staff can keep their boss busy enough so nothing changes. And basically nothing has changed since Carey and Roland Williams, because the staff has kept the boss so busy. There's been no classical change in Anglicanism since Lambeth 110, because the minions at church houses, we don't need any more of those decision-making things from our primates or from Lambeth. We just need to keep things going at an even flow, no conflict, there's nothing happening here, walk away, those flames are nothing. Justin Welby has, from his first day, stopped that. He's also done something brand new. Yesterday he appointed a new reconciliation minister called Canon David Porter, who's from Ireland. Now, a quick backdrop of Ireland. Northern Ireland, used to live in great conflict in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and there was basically a war in Northern Ireland between the IRA and the Ulster Union. And some would say it's between the Roman Catholics and the Protestants. Whatever it was really between, it was a mess of people who were so involved in hating each other they forgot why they hated each other. And it ended up in shootings, bombings, assassinations, grenades thrown into schoolyards, grenades thrown at funerals. Here watching in America, you couldn't understand what was really going on, to the point where the people in Ireland really didn't know what was going on. People like David Porter, and who was that famous Anglican that was over there?
Lord Eames,
Yep.
Robin Eames.
Yep. Helped these people draw to a peace. Now, the peace wasn't between Christians. The peace was a man-level peace. I will not annihilate you if you don't annihilate me. That's how man agrees at peace. We've done that with Russia and China and the places. The national, we won't self-destruct assurance. That isn't God-level reconciliation. We brought this man, David Porter, in to Lambeth Palace to help deal with what we call the War of the Anglicans. The Anglican communion is currently shattered and scattered because of heresy within the church. David Porter is going to be brought in to be a minister of reconciliation. Can he do that job, George?
Well, in many ways, the situation is just as bad verbally as it was in Northern Ireland. Last month, Catherine Jefferts Schori went to Charleston and called Mark Lawrence and the conservatives in that diocese terrorists and murderers, authoritarian thugs who had taken over the church unlawfully. And you and I get emails and see comments all the time by conservatives calling Catherine Jefferts Schori a witch and a heretic. That level of vitriol seems next to impossible to reconcile, and the way that the Anglican Communion has been trying to do it through the Indaba process, through a psychological approach with small groups and whatnot, that's basically a waste of time. That's what it's shown to be. The panel reference, the Indaba, all these different groups have pursued absolutely nothing. Now, what is different about this time around? Well, I'm excited, I'm encouraged, because it's a dirty word, Kevin, for some people. I'm about to say it, so you may need to bleep this out. But David Porter is an evangelical.
Oh, my ears, George. Ah.
And just as Justin Welby is an evangelical. When they talk about reconciliation, it's a multi-part process. And the first part of that sort of reconciliation is not between man and man, but between man and God. And once you're reconciled with God, once you are basically looking at things through the prism of holiness and godliness, you then move on to reconciliation with the people around you. And that is what has been able to affect change in Northern Ireland, so that now we have Martin McGuinness and Jerry Adams is part of the same government as Ian Paisley, and it's working, and they're happy. Those are IRA leaders and the Ulster Unionist leaders. Is it possible that Catherine Jefferts Schori and Bob Duncan could be brought to the same table and work in peace and harmony like the IRA and the Democratic Ulster Unionist Party? If it worked in Northern Ireland, it could very well work in South Carolina. I don't know.
It's different. This isn't Indaba. This is taking a direct charge of a situation and putting a man in charge of it. This isn't the panel reference. This isn't all the things that were tried before. This is something new. Now, the destination may be the same. We may still have a fractured communion at the end because they cannot reconcile. And this may reveal that there's no reconciliation possible. But we have a person who can help in identifying whether or not there is a possibility of reconciliation. If, 10 years from now, the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church in North America and Canada are no longer part of the Anglican Communion, well, this is something to help get us there.
Kevin, when we need to come back to what is the first significant staff appointment the Archbishop of Canterbury has made, it's this guy, David Porter, to work on the godly reconciliation of warring factions within the communion. That is the agenda that Justin Welby is setting down as his priority at Lambeth Palace. And to me, if it works, that's wonderful. If it doesn't work, it may be very well because that's God's will for the church at this time. But in any event, that's the focus. Not mosquito nets, not carbon fasts, not global warming, reconciliation under Christ. That's a wonderful thing.
Another thing an archbishop usually does his first week in office is sit down with the BBC or ITV or somebody for his interview. They don't sit down with Christian press. We don't see that from Archbishop of Canterbury's very often. But they pick a secular...
Not with the last one. The one before we did.
Yeah.
Rowan Williams, never.
Never. And for whatever reason, I didn't get to interview him. You got to interview him once, right?
2005.
Yeah. And
never again after that.
They ask hard questions. We're not going to have that. Well, this British interviewer for ITV sat down with Justin Welby, and he thought he had the perfect candidate, a European liberal, business background, hates banks and financial institutions. Obviously, this is going to be a great conversation that will play forever in interviewdom. And he sits down and says, Justin Welby, and this is quite verbatim, but sits down and says, Archbishop Welby, you're the new Archbishop of Canterbury, and there's been conflict in the communion over same-sex marriages and gay bishops and women clergy. Can you, as the Archbishop of Canterbury in England and Britain, help save us from those evil Anglicans around the world, and let them know that this is okay stuff? George, what does Justin say?
No. First off, it's not okay. The Church of England, Justin Welby, do not agree with the government's position on gay marriage and the changes it's making. And secondly, you have to remember, Justin Welby said, that I am Primate of all England and Archbishop of Canterbury as Archbishop and primus inter pares, first among equals, and I will not subordinate the Anglican Communion to British politics. I am not going to force everybody to be English, which was what the Welshman Rowan Williams wanted to do. This is a tremendous change. He's reasserting the independence of the church. He's reasserting the authority of the Archbishop's office as an Archbishop for the Communion, as opposed to a local chairman of the board.
So for the first week in office, I'm going to give, Archbishop Justin Welby a 10. You did very well for the first week. I look forward to nothing but good things in the second week. The reality is we don't know what it's going to look like when he finally resigns a decade down the line, whether he's had a real effect on the Anglican Communion or not. However, based on what I've observed from the first week, I can't complain. George, how about you?
A for effort.
A for effort. Please welcome our new sponsor, New Wineskins Missionary Network. They are advertising their 2013 Global Missions Conference. It's held in Ridgecrest, North Carolina, April 4th through the 7th. Please visit their website for more details. George, let's move on to the next story. This is going to be the ecumenical Anglican Unscripted. We talked about the Roman Catholics, the Anglicans. Let's move on to the Lutherans. For those who aren't in the know, Lutheranism started about 500 years ago in Germany from a man named Martin Luther who pounded a thesis on a door. And they have elements of Lutheranism here in America and around the world, in Europe. I think it's the official church of Norway, Sweden, and other places. Thank God it's not the official church here. Here in America, it's rather split. They have the UCLA, they have the Missouri Synod, and about 40 other branches of Lutheranism on American soil. They found something, the ECLA at least, found something they like about the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church is very progressive. They were the first to have a gay bishop. They have that whole sexual identity, gender issue going on. They don't say no to very much. They love carbon dating or carbon, whatever it's called. They love everything to do with the earth, nothing to do with God. Lutherans said, hey, let's adopt that, and they've really gone down this progressive route, somewhat moderately here in America, but quicker like in Sweden and other places. And just like in Anglicanism, there's a global response to when people do crazy things, George.
Yes, the Ethiopian Evangelical Church, Mekanis Jesus, one of the largest Lutheran churches in the Lutheran World Federation, last month at its General Convention broke with the ELCA and the Church of Sweden, saying, we are no longer in fellowship with you, you people are heretics, you cannot take part in our worship services, and our people are not allowed to attend yours. And Kevin, this is nearly identical with what's been happening with the Episcopal Church and the Church of Nigeria, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya. It's happening with the Lutherans too.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Lutheran Church has their own global south. And what's really interesting is like the churches in Ethiopia, which like maybe 10, 15 years ago were 70,000, they're now 7 million. And they have an amazing growth in the church going on where they took missionaries to proclaim the gospel. The people learned and heard the gospel, responded to that, and they have the same situation that we have in Anglicanism, where the true voice of the church is coming from under the equator and in Asia and Africa. And
the Ethiopian church says, look, your missionaries brought us the gospel 100, 150 years ago, and now you are telling us that gospel you brought us is no longer trustworthy and true, and we can't accept that. We have learned the secret, life in Jesus Christ, and now you're trying to tell us that we're wasting our time? Friends, it's you who are wrong, and we're breaking with you.
Now, what's really ironic to me is, okay, Lutherans swallowed the poison pill, the Episcopal Church did. The Global South responded by saying, stop, and we're going to separate from ourselves. And then the Lutheran Church says what, George?
Well, the Lutheran Church has taken the attitude of the Episcopal Church, which is, we'll keep the door open for you when you run out of money and need us then. And they're basically very paternalistic to the African churches, that the only thing that we can send them at this stage is money. And we don't want their theology.
A lot of you saw my interview a couple weeks ago with Archbishop Duncan of the Anglican Church in North America, and one of the things we discussed was the next GAFCON. If you don't remember, the first GAFCON called for a new province here in North America, and the Anglican Church in North America was a response to that. So if there's going to be another GAFCON, people have some really high expectations of what's going to be happening there. He said the next GAFCON 2 will be someplace in Nairobi, Kenya, October 20th, 21st that week. And I said, awesome, we got the lowdown, we're breaking another news story, George. That's what we do here at Anglican Unscripted. I said, George, find out what you can find out. What did you learn?
Well, I contacted the Sydney Secretariat of GAFCON, and they said they'd have Bishop Martin Minns, who's in charge of the conference, get back to me with details. And that was about 2 weeks ago, and I'm still waiting. And I've since talked to other ACNET groups and other Episcopalians who are involved in the GAFCON movement, and they're asking me, what do I know? Nobody knows what's going on. It's a deep, dark secret.
It is a deep, dark secret. I was thinking about this when we did our story on Justin Welby. Maybe he didn't like the calendar he had before because it didn't have GAFCON 2 on it. Don't know. But, you know, the reality is we understand one of the reasons it's in Nairobi is because of the visa issues of getting bishops and clergy from all around the globe into one country. It's very difficult because of visas. It's almost impossible to get them into Europe. Last time with GAFCON 1, they had trouble in Jordan. So we understand that issue. Is Nairobi the perfect place for this? Who knows? It may end up being, but it wouldn't be my first place in the tour guides to pick. However, coming up now, we need to start budgeting and planning, and I've talking to a couple bishops around the Anglican Church in North America who said we need to know what's going on pretty quick because we have to budget for this. And here at Anglican Unscripted, we need to budget for it too. So anybody out there who knows anything about GAFCON 2, please send it to AnglicanUnscripted@gmail.com. George, I feel like we should be wearing purple. George, let's do our Lenten story. Let's talk about the phenomenon known as ashes to go. A lot of people turned on their TV after going to church last Wednesday, and they saw something odd. What's the first video they probably saw, George?
Well, if you're like me, the first thing you saw in the local news was a dog water skiing. That was a big story. And in a similar theological, intellectual level, after the dog water skiing, they had shots of clergy up north standing outside subway stations and bus stops and in train platforms doing a little dabble-do-you, put some ashes on people's forehead. Ashes to go. Ashes to go.
It's been a reality here in the Episcopal Church since 2007. And the Episcopal Church has always suffered from lack of evangelical progress. The evangelism and Episcopal Church are oxymorons. And the reality on the ground is they always try to think of something new. How do we get out there outside of our churches, which, listen, I support. A clergyman on the streets doing God's ministry, feeding the poor and all those things is exactly what you should be doing, ministering the gospel. However, when you're taking what we call a liturgy, an act of penitence, and applying it to anybody walking by you, there's a difficulty, and even the Roman Catholics had trouble with this.
Yeah, I did a story about this, and I contacted the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and asked them, do you do this? And they said no. And the reason why is that we do not separate the imposition of ashes from the liturgy, the worship that surrounds it. In the Episcopal service, the Anglican service, before the ashes are laid upon you, you cite penitential prayers. You are contrite. You ask God to renew you, to forgive you, to guide you, to guard you. And when you separate that out and just have the ashes, this is Catholicism light. You've got liberal Protestants using a very traditional Catholic sacramental on the same level as holy water, miraculous medals, brown scapulars. That's where ashes come in the Catholic system. And they're using it in a totally theologically clueless way. What do they think they're doing? Oh, well, we're evangelizing people. Well, you know, the Bible reading in the RCL, the Revised Common Lectionary that day is, do not, parade your piety in public. And what exactly is this? Ashes to go. It's parading your piety in public. It's abhorrent.
Well, it's abhorrent for the very reason that the Lent is not a liturgy to non-Christians. It is a liturgy to the Christians, those who want to have a penitent time before Easter. There are things in our liturgy that are just meant for believers. And we apply that to the baptism, we apply that to marriage, to all these different parts of our prayer book. And it becomes a mess when we take that out onto the street and we let people know that, I'm putting, a little cross. You are pretty much saved. This is your way of me imparting penitence to you without you being penitent. And isn't that the exact problem the Episcopal Church has suffered for the last 2 or 3 generations?
Yeah, there's a big difference. People say, oh, well, didn't John Wesley go out and preach, and St. Francis preached the birds and all that? Yes, they were preaching. They were sharing the word. And how does faith come? Faith comes by hearing. Hearing what? The word of God. Does faith come by having carbon smeared on your forehead? No, it does not. It's just a sign of the theological bankruptcy of the sheer amateur. It's amateur hour when these guys.
It's amateur generation. Okay, let's do a closing for the show. Truth be told, this is a third deja vu for George and I. We've actually recorded this show 3 times. First one was an audio issue where the sound was sounded like a broadband modem trying to connect to a server. The second one, George accidentally deleted before he uploaded to the Dropbox for me to edit. And this is the third iteration of episode 65. And I gotta say, 65 was the best. If we could only do 3 tries for each of our episodes, we would have the perfect show. Audience numbers are growing every week. The ticker is ticking away, and it's impressive to watch. And we love that you love our show, and we love the comments you keep sending us. Little health update, George. What's happening next week with you?
Monday the 25th, I go in for surgery, and I'll be in the hospital anywhere from 2 to 5 days in recovery. It's a little bit anxious, a little bit scary, but I have a wonderful, supportive wife and a prayer team at the church. We have a Bible study on Wednesday, and the whole congregation has been praying for me, and just as we pray for each member of our church who is undergoing health issues. And Kevin, I think it's also having health troubles like this has really made me into a better priest, a better person. I understand how the value of suffering, how pain, you can rant and rave and just say all these, why Lord, why me? Or you can turn it around and say, Lord, what are you teaching me? What can I learn through these difficult times? And God has opened wonderful spiritual doors for me, and I'd rather not have to go through this, but having gone through it, God is doing great things.
Yeah, and this is an opportunity for the audience. You get to enjoy us every week as personalities who talk about the news and give you commentary, sometimes cause trouble, oftentimes break the news. But here's a chance to pray for George. George is going to be in the hospital. It's not a place he wants to be, not a surgery he wants to have. And just knowing that people on the other end of the screens and people who watch us are praying for him, we're going to have 20,000 people praying for George Conger. That's pretty exciting in my book, and it helped when I had my thyroid surgery last November. That's the cool thing about this whole community, social networking, recording a show for YouTube thing goes. On to pledging. George and I are trying to travel to Nairobi and different places and budgeting for GAFCON 2. Please pledge to the show. You can go to AnglicanTV/donate to find out how to do that. We're a 501(c), so your donations are tax deductible. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger, and you've been watching episode 65 of Anglican Unscripted.
I still have all these takes. Yesterday we finished with take 3. So 3, 2, 1. This is the last take, George. 3, 2, 1. George, let's move on to some Anglican news. We're going to talk about the new Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who last week had his first week.
Oh my.
3, 2, 1. George, let's move on to some Anglican news for story 2. We're going to talk about the new Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. Last week was his first week in office, and he said, he didn't say anything. 3, 2, 1.